In today's episode, we actually have a visionary and spotlight sip. We will be talking with visionary Shamann Walton, who is part of San Francisco's Board of Supervisors for District 10. He will be on sharing a lot about his background, his journey as a visionary in community and governmental relations. And he will also be joining us and sharing in our spotlight sip, talking about Project 2025, what every American voter needs to know about Project 2025 and what is at stake. So get your sip ready, get your eat ready, and get ready for the Visionary Spotlight Sip with Supervisor Shamann Walton. Cheers. Hello, sippers. Get ready for the S.E.T podcast where we sip, eat, talk, the ultimate blend of flavors and conversations. I'm Gina, your host, culinary enthusiast, and spirited conversationalist. Each episode will explore diverse topics, share laughs, and savor the moment with special guests. Sip on insights, eat up knowledge, and join the conversation. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and YouTube at Sip, Eat, Talk Podcast. Subscribe now for a journey that's as delicious as it is insightful. Let's sip, eat, and talk together. Cheers. Hello, sippers. Welcome to the S.E.T podcast where we sip, eat, talk. I'm your host, Gina. Whether you are sipping on your favorite mocktail, cocktail, champagne, energy drink, coffee, wine, or tea, you are sipping in with me, and I'm glad to have you. The audio podcast can be found on 16 different platforms. You can check out pod.link for a listing, which includes Spotify, Amazon Music, and Apple Podcasts. You can find us on social media at Sip, Eat, Talk Podcast on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Threads. You can find me, your host, Gina, on Instagram, and I am Gina Gibson. Well, it's one of my favorite times in the episode to let you guys know what I am sipping and eating on for the episode. As a proud Philly girl, a few weeks ago, I had an opportunity to go to the final farewell tour concert for one of my favorite bands, Frankie Beverly and Maze, and the bestie Buffy made a curry chicken salad that was so yummy and delicious. I could not wait to make it. So today I have made the curry chicken salad. I have actually paired it with a few breadsticks today. It is summertime. I love wine. I'm a seasonal wine drinker, so I'm sipping on whites all through summer. Sauvignon Blanc is one of my favorites. Josh is one of my favorite brands. So I'm sipping on the Josh Sauvignon Blanc today with my curry chicken salad. But, before we move into this visionary spotlight sip, I have to get a little taste. Let's get a little taste here, see what we are working with. Of course, the recipe will be posted. It's pretty simple. It has a few ingredients. It's so good. It is so good. I'm trying to figure out what makes it that good. Interestingly enough, water chestnuts, which I'm not a big fan of, are in the recipe, but I think that's what does it is the water chestnuts. They're really delicious. If I'm dancing, what that means, the happy dance. It's really good. And so as always, I want to know, what are you sipping and eating on for the episode? Be sure to take a picture, tag us in your photos at Sippy Talk Podcast so we can get some good ideas and share in on the fun. So today, this is a visionary spotlight sip because I called my good brother, one of my Brown Knight brothers, in because I wanted to have a conversation about Project 2025 because I love to have a good time. I love to laugh. Anyone who personally knows me, I love good, stimulating conversation. Anything that gets my mind going or makes me want to go and do some research when I'm done is always a win. And so as we are moving in this political climate, getting ready for a presidential election, there's so much talk about Project 2025 and just having a few conversations. There are a lot of people that don't quite know what it is. And if you are like me, you had to go read it and you heard about very high level stuff. I didn't realize the intricate things that came into play with it. So I wanted to be sure I use my platform to share about that. So you guys don't have to read every single detail, but I can at least give you a Cliff Notes version. And so I'm really excited to have a Supervisor Walton on today, not just a politician, but an advocate, a community advocate, someone who is boots on the ground and does not just talk the talk, but walks the walk, as they say, as well. And so I'm excited for this conversation. My goal is always for you all to walk away with something, learning something, finding out something new, being moved by something. And so I hope that you will enjoy this conversation today. So whatever you are sipping on, raise your glass with me and toast it up for a great visionary spotlight sip today with Supervisor Shamann Walton. Cheers. Brother from another mother, what is going on, Supervisor Walton? How are you today, brother?
I am doing great. Amazing. Good afternoon to you and to everybody. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm in Philly. I've lived in Atlanta for many years. Was in Cali for a really short time. Like, why do I have a guest on from Cali to discuss this topic today? And it's because this is family. I love having conversations with family. People I know their passions, what's important to them, their integrity. So it was really important for me to have you on. Thank you, brother. I appreciate you.
Well, I love having conversations with you. And obviously, the topic that we're about to talk about is very important for everybody out there. So 100%, I want to come on here and share a little bit of knowledge and talk about my opinion on some matters.
What you over there sipping on today?
I got that good reposado straight out of Mexico. It's actually pretty smooth. I figured we have a good conversation and sip on something real light, just to get the afternoon going.
I have my good chilled Sauvignon Blanc. Cheers. So let's give the people a little bit of background. People who listen to the podcast now know it's one place that I love to shout out continuously. Morris Brown College, Atlanta, Georgia. Right. That is how we made our connection. Do you remember how we met?
I remember it was in freshman week. Probably at the orientation or something. We probably had
freshman. It was Sabria from Florida.
That's
I met
right.
you through Sabria.
Then, we used to hang out in front of the towers.
I'm like, you know that Cali dude, California guy.
That's right. Yeah, right.
You know that's like 31 years ago, right?
I mean, I try not to count the decades. I just say we've been doing this for a long time.
Hard to believe, a very long time. So I know I have you on for the Spotlight Sip. We're going to be talking about Project 2025 today. But this is a little bit of a visionary sip as well, because I want people to know about you. I want people to know about your background and why it was important for me to have you on here, knowing you personally, what your journey has been. And so I want to go back and start a little bit at the beginning. If we met young Shamann Walton in San Francisco, tell us about young Shamann Walton in San Francisco.
Well, young Shamann in San Francisco was really considered, one of those busy children who people just couldn't get to sit still, who people didn't necessarily like to have to watch. And, transfer from San Francisco to Vallejo, where I started to grow up in my formative years and really just got involved in a lot of negativity. Okay. Young Shamann was fighting every day. Young Shamann, sold drugs. Young Shamann stole cars. Young Shamann was a teen parent. Young Shamann was somebody who was really headed for a life of destruction in the wrong way. But by the grace of God, I had a mentor that was strong and took me on the Youth Leadership Conference to Atlanta, Georgia, where I had seen people who looked like me that were thriving, that, the opportunity was right in front of them. The world was there. Sky's the limit. And after having conversations with them, the common denominator was education. And that really, we talked about it a lot growing up. My mentors, my mother, people would tell me about what it looked like going to HBCU, what it looked like being in a city like Atlanta, but have an opportunity to experience it and see it firsthand. It really made the change for me, and that experience changed my life. So young Shamann was definitely headed for a life of either incarceration or young death. That's right.
I love it. And in Morris Brown, your major was what?
Political science.
Political science. So what was the dream? I know, but share with people, what was the dream and the goal when you stepped into Morris Brown?
I always wanted to affect change, and I thought really first the way to do that was to become an attorney. So majored in political science because I was told that was the route and the best route, either that or English to become an attorney. Majored in political science, loved it.
There's a tagline that we associate with our school sometimes, and we say Morris Brown College changed my life. I had this conversation with our good brother, Dr. Rodney D. Smith, and I would say Morris Brown, I feel like the shift came where I became a visionary, but I didn't know that's what was happening. No one had taught me vision. I didn't know vision, but that's what was happening when I started thinking about my future, where I wanted to be. I could see it. I started making a plan. Do you remember a pivotal moment at Morris Brown where you don't know what happened, but you know something happened?
Well, I think that major shift most certainly happened for me before getting to Morris Brown.
Okay.
But what I will tell you, what validated the fact that I knew that not only I belonged at Morris Brown, that I belonged in college, but that I was headed in the right direction in terms of what I want to do in my life was the first debate that I went on in DC. And I've been on several debates, with Morris Brown, but we were doing the model organization African Unity, and I was representing Libya as my country that I had to do a resolution for and get it passed. And that whole experience, competing with other intellectuals from other, not just Black schools, but from other colleges across the country, and realizing that what we were being taught at Morris Brown, what I was learning, put me in a position to compete with everybody across the country. And also the fact that this young man who originally from the project, who, like I told you, lived life incarceration, been expelled from school, was now actually on the debate floor with other intellectuals. For me, that just hit different. Like, not only did I do everything to get here to overcome obstacles, but wow, I actually can do this. I actually can be in these spaces and in these places with these folks and not have that baggage of the things that, held me back for so long.
And I'm going to shout you. Our friend group will tell you we love a good debate. When you rock with Shamann Walton, and he sharpened my skills because I knew you can't just give. There's no fluff when we having a conversation. He's like, "No, G-Rock, no, I'm standing firm on my point." And so, thank you for help sharpening me, brother.
All day. That goes both ways. You know that.
I appreciate being able to see my friends grow and who they are. And I really want to celebrate you because in Morris Brown, you talked a lot. You had a plan. And I have to say, of a lot of people that I know, so many of us have changed directions, had callings, passions, but you really had your calling there because you have carried out your plan exactly as you said it said you would. I recognize now that you were one of the first visionaries that I knew. So I'm really proud of
can't
you.
take 100% credit for that. Obviously, God most certainly wanted that for me. And if you ask me the journey along the way, I would tell you it took longer than
Of
I
course
thought
you
it was
would.
supposed to. Right?
We're
But
overachievers.
that's right. And we're blessed. As I started working and getting in my career, I found that I really was more concerned about how governmental systems work.
Okay.
And so that's what made me end up getting my master's in public administration versus going to law school.
So what was the job that sparked that change about governmental relations? What do you remember the job, the moment that
Well,
changed for you?
I was the director of a family resource center in Potrero Hill, and a lot of the work that we were doing with families in the public housing community came down to really how you got resources, how you got funding in and into community. So I really wanted to learn more about the relationship between city government, the federal government, state government, and how resources from those levels get actually into the hands of community and the people that need them. So working on my MPA at the same time while actually working in the public sector and monitoring contracts really came in full circle for me.
Tell us about your time at Young Community Developers in San Francisco.
When I finished grad school and I actually left the public sector and became an executive director of an organization in San Francisco called Young Community Developers, the focus was on workforce and skill building and making sure that people had the opportunity to get the skills they needed to go work on jobs. We also provided a lot of education programs within the schools, and shout out to Gina for coming out and working with our young people, getting them prepared for college and letting them know everything they needed so that they could go into higher education. So workforce, education, and then we started also developing housing. And before I left the organization, we developed our first project, 60 units, all affordable housing, which is something that I was extremely proud of to be able to do. But also working as executive director in San Francisco, working at a pretty large nonprofit, it puts you around all of the politics. There's no way you could be an ED in San Francisco and not be connected to the politics if you want to be successful. Right. So obviously having relationships with all the mayors, having relationships with all the members of the Board of Supervisors, and seeing a lot of young people come through my doors that had a bad experience with the education system. So first ran for the Board of Education, lost the first race.
Your platform as a professional has really been built on community development, workforce development, education. Like that's been something that you've been really solid in doing. And so we talk a lot about the journey here because I always want our listeners to be inspired. How did losing that first race change you?
I always look at things and maybe compartmentalize situations for what we can get out of everything that we do, and looking at all of things that we try as an opportunity. So even though I lost an election, I actually got a lot of name recognition, did a lot of citywide campaigning because it was a citywide office. And so I had a lot of experience and knew a lot of people, most certainly in my community in the area where I did most of my work. Campaigning taught me a lot more about San Francisco, taught me a lot more about what parents wanted, what people wanted to see, what was important to people as a whole. And so I don't look at that opportunity actually as a bad thing, because it also helped young community developers as an organization, because all the connections that I made networking and running for office transferred into opportunities for the organization. So we won hands down 2 years later. Served on the Board of Education for 4 years, became the Board of Education president, and then ran for supervisor in 2018.
Right. And so for people who might be in Philadelphia, Delaware, in the northern area, we would say city council, board of supervisors. It would be the same. I do want to highlight something that you have done in this role for our listeners that may not be aware. Talk to us about the Karen Act, the political climate at the time when you did it.
We all remember the tragedies of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, but also a lot of other things were happening around the same time. If you recall, there were a lot of Black people that were being harassed by people in community just for doing daily activities. We had some folks barbecuing in Lake Merritt in Oakland, and somebody called the police on them. We had right in San Francisco a gentleman who wrote Black Lives Matter on his own home and was coasted by this white couple, and they called the police on him. And so there's a dynamic of folks calling the police on Black people just for doing average, everyday, daily activities. And the reality of it is, in some of those cases, we've seen people get arrested. We've seen folks brutalized by the police. One of the worst cases, obviously, in history is Emmett Till, where false accusation was made and he was murdered, lynched. And so we know that it can be really consequential when folks call the police on folks for just no reason. And the reality is they were calling the police on folks for being Black.
Right.
And so in San Francisco, we passed a law called the Karen Act, Caution Against Racially Exploitative Non-Emergency Phone Calls, where if you call the police on somebody for an arbitrary reason and something happens, you can be civilly liable for at least $1,000, depending on what happens to that person. It can go higher. Our state attorney general, Rob Bonta, at the same time, who was in the state assembly, also passed a similar state law, but his also had criminal penalties involved.
Okay. So I'm curious where we are now in 2024 opposed to where we were in the last presidential election. How are things different for you? What would you say is the biggest difference?
Well, I was extremely scared of what was happening to democracy in 2020. And if extremely scared is how I define 2020, then whatever you can say worse, that's where I'm at in 2024. We are at a time period where our democracy can be obliterated by the wrong decision and the wrong choice in this election. And if you go back historically, whether it was empires, dynasties that lasted, every empire, every dynasty was overthrown and changed and shifted. We've been able to,
That's a good analogy.
in this case, have a democracy for hundreds of years, and it's been pretty stable. But most certainly, if you look at history, we've seen stable democracies or stable empires and dynasties be overthrown. And the work that has happened with some of the leadership in this country at this point is undermining our tricameral system, is undermining the Constitution, and definitely undermining the democratic process that was put in place so that we could remain stable, so that we could have civil leadership changes, so that the country could thrive regardless of disagreements and political differences.
When we talk about the state of democracy in America, for anyone who is listening or anyone's going to watch us on a YouTube video, what is Project 2025 and why should it be on every American's radar?
Well, just real quick before we dive into that, I have to say, if you look at what happened when folks stormed the Capitol after Trump lost the election, and if you look at the fact that really there's not been major consequence
At
for
all.
something like that. And, in most countries, and thank God we're not like most countries, but most certainly, if you storm the building where laws are made and where the leadership of the country is, the results would have been different for you in terms of how many people would have walked away alive. And most certainly, if there was Black folks who did the same thing, it would have been a massacre
Why is it
at the
so
Capitol.
hard for Americans to understand that? That I get upset. Why is it so hard for
It's
Americans to
not hard for
understand that?
Americans to understand
You
that. They
don't
just
think
don't want to
so?
admit it. No, they just don't want to admit it. I mean, people are real good at masking their true feelings or trying to pretend like we don't have a problem. And we know that that's not the reality. So, no, I don't think it's hard for people to believe. I think it's hard for people to say out loud and just hard for people to admit.
I
Why I
agree with
brought that
you.
up as we go to Project 2025. And if you look at how, you know, Trump tried to challenge the vote count everywhere
Mhm.
and tried to do everything he could to undermine the vote. And even now, there are laws changing to
Mhm.
do everything they can to suppress people from having the opportunity to vote. I mean, and this has just been a master plan. Let's do
Mhm.
everything we can to make sure people can't vote. It wasn't about who became president, but it most certainly was about who was going to have the ability to support, to appoint those Supreme Court justices
Yes.
that don't have a tenure and
Mhm.
could be there until they die. And now we see with a Trump presidency and the appointments, some of the very protections that people have had for decades are
Right.
changing. Women don't have the right to choose what they want to do with their body, labor. All of those things that are happening are a chain reaction of why we're getting to what Project 2025 is about,
Okay.
which, on the surface, they'll say is a way to overhaul the executive government so that the executive can make decisions easier. But the reality of it is it's something that they're trying to put in place so that we can be in a dictatorship here in the United States. They want to take
Because
away
it
the
really
rights.
is constitutional change. At the end of the day,
Oh, yeah,
it's
and it's
constitutional change.
constitutional
I don't
change,
hear
but
pundits saying that when people talk about it. Like,
but
this is
it's
constitutional change. That's how deep
but
this
it's
is.
it's a little bit, yes, it's a little bit more the way that it's done, the way that the propaganda is
Mhm.
stated, right? I mean, they try to, make everything about the surface level and they don't
Mhm.
talk and go in depth about what's really happening. And they want to get
Right.
rid of the bureaucracy. They want the president to be able to come in and just have all full authority over everything within the executive branch and get rid of folks who have worked in leadership and have expertise for decades,
Mhm.
and just come in and have all authority over everything without question. The Supreme Court decision said
Right.
that the president can do whatever they want to while they're in office, basically.
Mhm.
And so that goes hand in hand with a policy like Project 2025 that says we're going to make sure the executive has all power. And it goes against the democratic values, it goes against the
Yes.
Constitution because we have a system in place where checks and balances are real. There's a
Exactly.
reason why, most certainly, the president has a lot of power, but
Mhm.
there's a reason why the legislative branch can declare war. There's a reason why the Supreme Court and the judicial branch can interpret laws.
Mhm.
Because if you give one person all power,
It's
which exists
dictatorship.
in other countries, it is a straight dictatorship, and that's when they
Mhm.
want to get back to. And make no mistake about it, because Trump has tried to distance himself from Project 2025, but we know that the folks at the Heritage Foundation um, are the people that
Right.
Trump listened to when he was
Mhm.
a president. The policies that he put in place, the decisions that he made were heavily influenced by the folks that make up the Heritage Foundations and the folks that are pushing Project 2025. So when Trump tries to say, he's not a part of this, this is really a ploy, obviously, to
Mhm.
get elected. Just like when he said, I need to stop talking about people shouldn't be able to get abortions if they were raped or incest because I need to get elected. But make no mistake about it, he's going to pull a bait and switch for sure.
Right.
If he's elected, Project 2025 will be the policy which on the
I
table.
was having a conversation with someone a couple of weeks ago. As you know, we spent many years in Georgia, and I went to law school in Louisiana, so still have a lot of connections with people in Georgia, Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama. And I was disheartened at the amounts of Southern Black Christian people and I'm in connection with and know that are supporting the Trump administration, but it's all hindered just on religion. It doesn't look like the
For
totality
sure.
of everything. It's just centered on abortion. It's centered on the LGBTQ community. Like that is the only discussion. And so I'm always curious of how do we move that conversation, because I'm not telling people not to have spiritual values, but I'm concerned. So you think that President Trump's history and record exhibits Christian values and behavior? So the whole election is just hinges on those two things. That is concerning to me. I'm curious what you think.
I think it's overt. I think that we have folks who are extremely religious, extremely spiritual, and everything to them is black and white, no pun intended. So if it doesn't align with their Christian values, if it doesn't align with whatever their base of religion is, the Bible, Quran, whatever the case, then they'll go against their own interests. But religion is just as powerful as racism. Racism is a powerful thing.
It is.
And you'll see so many people voting against their own interests, going against their own interests because of racism and hate. Hate is powerful. Racism is powerful. And most certainly, spiritual beliefs are powerful. And sometimes when your beliefs are what they are, you're going to maybe go against your own best interests in the name of what your beliefs are.
Right.
And so people who hate a race or a demographic, even if that race or demographic is what's best for their future and what's best for their family, they will not see the fact that it's detrimental to them, and they got to go with their hate and go with their racism because it's powerful. Same thing when it comes to religion at times.
So even reading through, I've been looking at some highlights, things that I want our listeners to know and walk away with, because the truth is, Shabbat, everybody's not going to read it. Everybody's not going to do a deep dive on it. So I want to be sure that this platform can share some tidbits that people can hold on to. And so healthcare is even really important in there. And so I would like if you could speak to that for a moment and some of the highlights of healthcare in Project 2025.
Well, there's always been attack on providing health care for people who are most vulnerable. But I have to look at the belief system and the fact that what is put out there is not actually true. People pay into Medicare. This is not something that the government is just giving away. People are actually paying into Medicare and have paid into it for years. And so some of the things that we got from the New Deal that are in place is actually on the backs of the American people. And people forget that. And the propaganda will make you believe that people are getting free Medicare and free healthcare, which has not been the case and has never been the case for the most part. And folks want to get away of single payer health and don't want universal healthcare because people know that the most vulnerable and the folks who need healthcare the most are the ones that they would like to not see still be here and still exist. And so that's just another way of getting rid of folks that you might not want to be around, or another way of trying to separate communities.
So in Project 2025, there is no separation. Is there a separation of church and state?
Well, I think what Project 2025 will try to get you to believe is that there is a separation of church and state. But the fact of the matter is, the folks in Project 2025, will state and claim that they have heavy Christian values. And that is the basis of why they push the agenda that they push. So when it comes to the fact they want to attack women's reproductive rights, when it comes to the fact that they want to attack the rights of people and how they identify in terms of their gender, going back to your point about contraception and telling people when and how they can have babies and if they should and should not have babies and under what circumstance. It goes deeply, it's deeply rooted in religion and religious beliefs. And they have no qualms about that. So they will use hate, they will use discrimination, they will use everything to attack the basic rights of folks in this country and blame it on Christianity. So they will try to say there's a separation of church and state, but most certainly the beliefs, the way they write policy, the validation for a lot of the way that they feel comes from the fact of their Christian beliefs.
So I made a note here. The plan talked about reclassifying, like I have a friend that works for the government, specifically with the Navy, and it said reclassifying federal civil service workers as political appointees. And so the potential dangers in that I hope that people recognize is that when you take people, and this is like taking people out of jobs they've been on, building their pensions, 401ks, the 15, 20, 30 years, like almost there. And so when we talk about there'll be potential appointees, there'll be appointees of the president, right? So if it was, if this was something that Donald Trump went by, that means he's now removing all those people and putting all his people in there,
Right.
who could be qualified, who may not be qualified based on some of the things we saw in his prior presidency. And so I want to know, because there's so much to talk about, but if you had to give our listeners, if you had to give American voters a call to action with regards to Pride 2025, the election, what would that be, Supervisor Walton?
Well, again, I think they should understand that Project 2025 is a real attempt to, it's really about king making, and they really want to put somebody in a position to where their word, their policies, their focus, everything they want to do is unchallenged.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about bringing somebody in. First of all, the president has a lot of powers already. They already appoint their own cabinet. They appoint the leadership of a lot of these federal agencies. They appoint the leadership, but there are experts and expertise that have been around for years, and those folks' jobs have been protected for years because they know the job of the department. They do the work for the department, and quite frankly, in a lot of cases, they are unbiased, and they're not pushing and doing work on behalf of one political party or another. Now, do I ever believe that there's a true separation of politics and administration dichotomy? No. But most certainly, those professionals that have been around under several different administrations have expertise and experience. What Project 2025 will do is remove all of these government classification employees and let the president come in and appoint whoever he wants to every job that exists. So not only will jobs be lost for millions of Americans, quite frankly, but those positions will be appointed and changed, and most certainly this person who comes in and makes these appointments will basically be a king and be able to be a
It's a dictatorship.
Everybody that they put in place will be holding and have to answer to them. So it takes away the very focus of what democracy should be, what democracy should look like, and what the Constitution was put in place for. And people have to understand that, because they're going in and just appointing whoever we want when we come in place. That's king making. They have to understand that when you can storm a Capitol, or when you can get the Supreme Court to say you can do whatever you want as long as you are in a certain position, that's king making. And that was never the intent of what leadership or what the democracy should look like here in the United States. And our tricameral system of government, which was the foundation of making sure that we don't get a person that had too much power, that we don't get a branch of government that has too much power. All of that is being attacked right now. Project 2025 is the handbook, the guideline, the Bible, if you will, of how to undermine the democratic system that we've had in place for over 200 years.
And if I had a mic, I would drop it right now. I appreciate you so much. I just really want to celebrate you again, just for the work that you do, how much you invest into your community and politics, just in platforms like this, sharing. But before I let you go, I want to know, for those who may not be familiar with you, I got a lot of his backstory when he first got on, you guys, because he has a very great story. I would like for you to share with our listeners about your book, because he is an author, you guys, where they can find it. Tell us a little bit about it, and let the people know.
Well, I definitely appreciate that. But my book is autobiography, also written with one of our close friends, Keisha James, who went to Morris
Shout out
Brown
to my
with us.
line sister. Ooh.
You know, but it's called From Juvenile Hall to City Hall, Your Resume Can Change. And it really just highlights a lot of the lessons and mistakes that I learned in my childhood, particularly my teenage life, from being incarcerated several times, to being a teen parent, to being raised by a single mom, to selling drugs, to all of the things that would say you're going to either be in jail or be dead by a certain age. And by the grace of God, mentorship, exposure, and having a strong mom, we were able to make certain changes, go on a college tour, see what life could be like if we made some shifts and changes and got to an area where Black folks were concerned about each other. And so it highlights my journey. It talks about the fact that you can go from incarceration to the president of the board of supervisors in a major city if you make the right shifts and changes. And I want young people to really know that maybe whatever their current circumstance is, most certainly it doesn't have to dictate their future. And that's what I wrote the book for. And we are doing good. But the main thing for me is that it is resonating with young people, and they are seeing that you can be in a certain place at a certain time and end up being successful and learn from the mistakes that you made.
Where you can get a copy
of
you
can go to
Supervisor Walton's book.
Amazon.com and type in From Juvenile Hall to City Hall and purchase the book that way, hardback, soft copy, or of course, electronic.
All right. Shamann Walton, we appreciate you. Thank you for joining us. And so if there's anything left of that reposado, let's cheers it up and close it out for a great episode. Thank you for coming.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.
Cheers.
Get out and vote, whatever you do. Cheers.
Get out and vote. Cheers. Well, there you have it. Another episode. I really appreciate Shamann. I appreciate Supervisor Walton taking his time out. My hope, again, is that everybody walked away with a better understanding of something. And if you would, be sure to share this episode so at least it gets the conversation on people's mind. I will put a link in the description of where you can actually find Project 2025 in its entirety so you can read it and look at it for yourself. Again, I just want to make sure that I use my platform as I've been gifted to have it to be able to share, educate, and inform. And so I thank you. I appreciate you. Just as a reminder, you can visit SIP-E-Talk-Life.com. You still have time to get your charcuterie board, your custom SIP-E-Talk charcuterie board. Thank you to everyone who has been supporting and ordering their boards. So get your boards, order it, enjoy it. We are still running the free shipping special, so make sure you get your board today. I've also put a link in the description of where you can get a copy of Supervisor Walton's autobiography, so be sure to check that out. Remember to follow us Instagram, Threads, TikTok, and YouTube at SIP-E-Talk Podcast, and follow me on Instagram. I am Gina Gibson. Remember, life is too short for bad vibes and bad drinks, so keep sipping, keep chatting, but always remember, life is better with a sip and a chat. Until next time, cheers. Thank you, sippers, for joining the S.E.T podcast where we sip, eat, talk. If you've enjoyed our flavorful conversations, don't miss out on future episodes. Subscribe now and follow us on Instagram, at YouTube, at Sip, Eat, Talk Podcast. Let's continue to sip, eat, and talk together. Until next time, cheers.